Good evening, all. So it's nice having us back on this session. We'll be looking, like we expect, we'll be taking comparative foreign policy tomorrow, and this is meant to be like more of a revision. So notwithstanding, since it's also advisable that we just try to go through the whole thing probably from the beginning. Yes, we'll take it from the basis. So from there, you can now start thinking of the application. All right, so back to the basis. You might be wondering, so why foreign policy? Why policy? Why comparative policy? It's good to understand what's it called? How the actors in the international system, how they tend to prepare to take things, and when they even, take some actions, it's good to understand why they are doing that and what they want to achieve with it. So in the process of trying to understand why they are doing what they are doing and what they intend to get from it, then we want to understand the policy, foreign policy, and comparative foreign policy. Now, basically, if you're taking policy, policy is, in a simple term, is being said to be a course of action. And in some cases, some will say it is more of a purposive, like, you're taking an action, but again, behind that action, there is a purpose, for taking the action, and there's an objective that you intend to achieve with the action. So policy is a reasoned choice emerging from consideration of competing options. Now, so like I explained earlier, when you are about to do something to achieve an objective, at times you weigh your options. So you're going to Yaba from here now. You want to consider different options like, okay, should I take a bus? Should I take a bike? So again, what do you intend to do at Yaba? It's still part of the policy. But again, so how you go about it, that shows the course of the action. So, and this whole thing comes from the policy. It can also be, defined as, okay, it also represents the principles influencing actions or intending purposes to serve. So when you look at the principle influencing what you do, then eventually that's the policy. So we're taking this as policy now. We're not talking about what policy, but this is generally, understanding the concept of policy. So if you're now taking it like, okay, so what kind of policies? A typical one that you should see around you, for those who work in a corporate organization, you should have policy like accounting policy, you should have policy like HR policy, you should have policies like information security policy. Now, this policy will describe things that you'll be doing. It tells you why you're doing what you're doing, and it tells you the objective of what you're doing. Anyway, this may not be common with all organizations anyway, but in a standardized organization, policies are set up mostly by the management. And yes, in such organizations that have a good corporate governance, that will be approved by the board of directors as well. Now, when we understand this policy and different ways where policies are used, we'll now take it down to where we are today, MPIA. So we want to talk about the foreign policy. So because there are various policies, now this is specifically about a policy you are applying, outside, or whenever you have an engagement or anything to do with outsiders or anything beyond your boundary. So taking it from different definition, it's a type of policy that goes beyond the boundaries of a given state. It's also the embarked action taken by a state while interacting with other states or in the international system towards achieving its set goals and objectives. So you can see some common elements that you need to put in the description of what a policy is. And in this case, when you have foreign taken into the description of the foreign policy. So the moment you understand policy, and we can now apply it when it comes to foreign, and we know foreign is, outside the boundary. Again, you can see foreign as when a state or a nation, is dealing with maybe a neighboring nation or anything outside the boundary of that nation. So again, it can also be said to be a set of principles that define the pursued objectives of a given state while interacting with other actors in the international system in order to advance the state's national interests. Now, this definition is much broader. You are taking into consideration that.
Please, Razak, hello. Could you please say that last one again? Pursued objective.
Okay, so I said it is a set principles.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just taking.
Yes, just this last one. Yeah.
Cool. So I heard you. So I said it is a set of principles that define the pursued objectives of the given states. So, the essence of saying given states here is trying to put it into parentheses, like, okay, of who. So it is a set of principles that define the pursued objectives of the given state while interacting with other actors in the international system. For what? In order to advance the state's national interest. So this is a kind of definition, you can put it in like maybe 3 or 4 places. Pursued objectives, of who, of a given state, at what point in time, when it's interacting with other actors in the system, or so in the international system, and also for what reason, in order to advance the state's national interests. So this, if you look at it from that 4, what's it called, segregation, or 4 elements, you can see how it's built when you want to see, okay, so what is policy or foreign policy? Now you're taking that foreign policy being a principle, that's, set of principles rather, that define the pursuit objective. So when you see those principles being stated, let's take the common one, United States saying it protects the citizen and also the boundaries of the states. So you now look at it, okay, so this is the principle now, but in the main reason why do you have this principle is because, yes, it's an entity, it got its freedom, or its independence rather. At the time it got its independence, the next thing was, they had suffered, for every country that had suffered from, how do I say it, from the days of colonization. The moment they got independence, the first thing they want to think of is, hey, at this moment, now that we are free, I want to protect my boundary and I want to protect my citizen. So this could be taken as the pursued objective for having that principle. And again, at what point is this principle, applicable? When it is interacting with other actors in the international system. And for what reason is this policy being set? It's because it has to promote the state's national interests. So the interest of the United States at the end of the day is what is being promoted. Because truly, if the country, the independent country refused to protect its citizen and its boundary, then this comes as integrity issue. If eventually a US citizen is killed anywhere in the world now, the next thing, the foreign, maybe the Secretary of the State or the Foreign Minister, from the moment starts spitting, like, how dare you kill my citizen, and that's the next thing. So you understand why these policies were put in place, to ensure that all this, are being achieved in the interest of the state's national interests. So let's move forward. Foreign policy and national interests. So when you look at these two, though one is more like a subset when it comes to talking about the linking or the what's it called, the relationship, foreign policy and national interest. So it is generally believed that the formulation and execution of foreign policy is determined to a large extent by the national interest of a nation. So if there is no national interest, it's as good as there's no foreign policy. Because the essence of saying, how do we deal, how do we engage other actors in the international system, is because you want to also consider, okay, so what's the need for me? So what comes to me eventually if I'm this good to my neighboring country, if I'm this supportive to the world powers. So what comes back, or what is being told about me as a nation? So these are the things that goes into what makes the national interest. And again, why national interest is very, very important in foreign policy. So national interest, taking national interest, according to Morgenthau, it conceptualizes it as power among power. So you see a soldier, for example, that wants to die for the country. He can equally, you wonder, how the guy was able to withstand so many bullets and all that, and yes, he's still fighting. When in real sense, you see some people like they'll just slap the guy for one issue, and the next thing the guy is on his heel, as in taking off. But in this case, these are people that were taking bullets, being ambushed, but yet, even though he had the opportunity to run away, to abandon the cause, he won't. But what makes the guy, that adamant, that strong, it's because he has this national interest within him. So that's the power among the power. So national interest in this case is taken as something that fuels, the existence, the what's it called, the relevance of the policy. So that was what Morgenthau said. It conceptualizes it as power among power. Kaplan said, it's the interest in which a national actor has in implementing the needs of the national system. So when you see a national actor, just like I mentioned, taking for example that military guy or that soldier that you see,
Hello, sorry, it's cracking. I got lost. It's cracking. I don't know if it's just me, but it's cracking and I got lost. Sorry.
So can any other person confirm the network is not good? because I'm actually using my Wi-Fi, so maybe I'll switch. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now. It's clear.
I just want to confirm if it's the same for every other person there.
Okay. No worry, no worry.
Are we together?
It's clear. Yeah.
Loud and clear. I can hear you loud and clear.
It's better now.
Okay.
It has always been better. This is so flying.
All right. So, well, at times we have this network glitch, so sorry about that. Okay, so let's proceed. I was talking about the national interest, and I mentioned the Kaplan's view about national interest being the interest in which a national actor has in implementing the needs of the system, of the national system of action. So what this simply implies is the fact that when you see that foreign minister that goes out to defend the nation, or the military in that case, what makes him to stand firm, to ensure that that thing is set out to achieve, is probably achieved eventually, is the national interest in that case. So Frankel also opined that it is a key concept in foreign policy. So maybe you had my own, that me, I'm saying national interest is the art. When I say the heart, as in, living things have hearts now. Or would I say human? So the art of foreign policy could be national interest. Because when there is no national interest, and for me, I don't think there is any foreign policy. So we can say, based on common understanding, that it amounts to the total sum or aggregate of all the national values, objectives, goals, or interests of the individuals and or groups in the nation. So now, when we conceptualize it based on this definition, looking at a nation, when they talk about the national interest, now that national interest must have factored in the aggregate, the total sum of national values or objectives or goals, interest of individuals and or groups in the nation. So it means the country, or for example, the foreign minister wouldn't have gone ahead to meet or to engage a neighboring country, maybe on his own personal interests, rather than the aggregation of interests, values, objectives of individuals or groups in the nation. So if the foreign minister had gone out to take on probably meeting a Cameroon president, for something, without looking at or without considering the interest of the groups, individuals in the nation, then that is not a national interest. That's more like a personal interest. So national interest has to do with, the amount, total sum, aggregation of national values, objectives, goals, or interests of individuals and or groups in the nation states. Is that clear? I'm asking a question. Is that clear?
Yeah.
It looks like I'm the only one here.
Yes.
I'm just
No, you're not.
in.
So
I'm not even following up with you guys.
Quiet.
Okay. So if you're just coming in,
Can you recap?
if you're just coming in, we have talked about policy, as build up. We've talked about policy, we've talked about foreign policy, and we're talking about national interests. So the first thing you need to understand as a basis for this course is to understand policy. Though I had also discussed why are we studying policy. So again, you need to know what policy is. And when you say policy, you're looking at the concept being, purposive, course of action. So that means you are not just doing something for the doing sake. You're doing it because it's purposive. There's something you intend to achieve at the end, and what you want to achieve and why you're doing it has to come into the making to make it a policy. So it has to be a purposive course of action. So we talked about that. We moved on to talk about, foreign policy. So yes, I had also talked about policy being not just applicable to, our focus here being foreign policy. Policies generally are like principles, and those principles are designed in a way, or they are formulated in a way that there is always a reason, a why that you're going into it, which is the purpose. And there's always the objectives, or there are always objectives that you intend to achieve for taking that course of action. So for the foreign policy, then, we're saying that these should be, principles that, or would I say, set of principles that define the pursued objectives. So you can see something like, if you want to picture it in your mind, using your left hand to hold the why, which is the set of principles. Now, the pursued objectives being what you intend to achieve. But again, where are you applying this? When this is a policy, but where are you applying it? You're applying it at a time where you are interacting with other actors in the international system. That's what makes it foreign policy. But again, so why is a nation going into this? Why is a nation setting principles, that define pursued objectives while interacting with other actors in the international system? It's because it intends to advance the state's national interests. I hope this explains foreign policy. It looks like I'm the only one here.
You can go ahead.
No.
You can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Somebody said no. Hello?
We are here.
Okay, I heard somebody say
Hello, Razak. You can go ahead.
no. So,
You can go ahead.
all right. So then we moved on to talk about
So
foreign
you stop
policy.
at the national interest. So go ahead.
Okay, so we are going to discuss national interest and also gotten different views, opinions by some scholars who had come to describe what they see or how they view national interests. Magantao saying it is power amongst power, Kaplan saying it's interests in which a national actor has in implementing the needs of the nation's system of action. And also, Frankel saying it is key concept in foreign policy. And I said, based on the common understanding, it's been defined to be amounts or the total, it amounts to the total sum or aggregate of all national values, objectives, goals, or interests of the individuals and or groups in the nation states. So with this, we're done with national interests. So that was why I asked earlier that, do we understand the concept of national interest with this? So I'm asking again, do we understand the concept of national interest? If it's still not clear, we can still take it.
It's not clear, Mr. It's not clear. Thank you, exactly.
Okay. So, should I take it from, what's it called? Are you trying to get the definition, or are you trying to understand what is national interest?
Let's talk about the definition and what it's all about. I mean, the national interest.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, taking those scholars' opinion, Morgenthau said it is, for him, he conceptualized it as power among power. So, when you look at it, it is what makes, if you had seen a movie before where in military, they try to uphold the flag, and the person who is the flag bearer, even at the point where, is being, how do I say it? Even if the person is being chopped, like, to the point of taking his life, he will continue to hold on to the flag like, no, this is my flag, this is my country. That thing that makes him, to still dwell, to look like, no, even to the point of taking my life, I will continue to see that this thing is here, is actually the interests. And when you look at interests now, this is taken from a national perspective to make it a national interest. We all have personal interest in things. If there's a business you want to do, your personal interest in that business, like, okay, I want to make profits. That's my personal interest in this business. But national interest has to consider, the nation in totality. And that was why that definition that sums the whole thing says, national interest amounts to the total or aggregate sum of the national values, objectives, goals, or interests of individuals or groups in the nation. Apparently, when we just conceptualize and think of a nation, so if you're writing a policy, a foreign policy for that nation, you have to put into the consideration, for example, the population of Nigeria. You have to also put into consideration again the interest of the groups, the ethnic groups, the North and South. All this have to put into consideration to make it a national interest. Now, when you look at all this, you look at the position of Nigeria being a country that has 200 million, population. In this country, you have, you have people that are educated. You have so many that are not educated. You have those, like they want to say, you have those who want to jackpot, you're putting all these people, you're putting their interests there. So this is what makes it the national interest when you're writing foreign policy. So that was why we said national interest based on definition, it amounts to the sum or total sum or aggregate of all national values, objectives, goals of individuals and or groups in the nation state. Is there anywhere or any angle now that is still not clear? If that's your question, no? I don't mind taking it again. Because the more you ask me to look at it, the more I try to see it differently, the more I try to even understand it more. So if I'm not getting
understood, like I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so I've not heard from Madam Olabisi.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay, so I can ask you the question now to be very sure that
Okay.
you
Abdrazak.
are.
Oh yeah, sorry to take you back.
It's okay.
Please, can you please take it all over again?
Okay.
And slowly this time, please. Slowly with examples.
The national interest, so just take it one after so you can be able to follow up. Egbon, I'm with you. Egbon, I'm with you.
Governor, go and speak.
Okay, so
Egbon, don't tackle me.
So when you say I should take it again, am I starting from policy again or just the national interest?
The definition of national interest, the way you put it, just like what you said earlier. Okay, let's take it all over.
All over, please.
Back to it again.
Okay.
I said, based on my own explanation, I've explained this policy as a build-up. So when I give you a definition, I try to give an example. I'll give you something more elaborate again. I try to give an example and also still give you what looks like more of a standard definition. So if you follow this trend, this is how I've been trying to explain each of these terms. So back again to policy. I said, first off, you can say policy is the course of action. And again, that course of action must be purposive. And when I say purposive, I means it's not just something you are doing, but there should be a purpose that you're doing this. And that one makes it a policy. So I can decide to hit the wall, and I'm just eating it for eating sake. But in the same manner, I can decide to hit the door. Why am I hitting the door? Because I want somebody inside to be able to attend to me. So for policy, it has to be purposive and being a course of action. That's the first definition now. We're going to the second one. It states that is a reasoned choice emerging from consideration of competing options. So that was why I went to give you the example of if you are setting out to go to, for example, let's say you're setting out to go to, let me see which country would I use now. Okay, let's say you want to go to Ghana and you're trying to weigh your options. These competing options can be like, I can decide to go through water, for example. So that means we're taking the coastal line to Ghana, or go through the normal land borders. So we take a bus from here in Lagos that goes through Cotonou and all that to Ghana. Then again, you can decide to why not just take a flight? So now, the reasoned choice emerging, by the time you take that decision, like, okay, after weighing this option, I'm taking this one. That reasoned choice emerging from the consideration of these competing options is also policy. Now, finally, the main definition that is more elaborate for this purpose is it also represents the principles influencing actions or intending purposes to serve. There are times where you can say you have a policy, but the action will not materialize. Let me see where we have something looking like that. But what I tend to say here is you might want to do something which you have a policy for, but again, maybe eventually you didn't achieve the purpose, but again, there's a policy for that. So that's where the intending purpose to serve is, but again, when you have done that thing, it represents the principles influencing that action. When US set out to attack this, what's it called? Okay, let's say when US set out to kill Osama bin Laden, you know, there was a policy that was written to ensure that this is what they would do. And that policy influenced the action to achieve that purpose. So it represents the principles influencing action or intending purposes to serve. Now, this is policy. But again, can we now step ahead to look at what a foreign policy is? So, like I mentioned in the example and I said earlier, there are different policies. Those I can relate with, that I can give you, those that I know that in the corporate organization, where you have standard corporate governance, there are policies written. There are policies written for accounting, there are policies written for HR, there are policies written for what's called information security. Now, this policy is going to tell you at least three things. One is, you know, what action are you going to take? Why are you taking that action? And also, what will you get as output or objective, what's called goals for doing this action? So if it's not telling you these things, perhaps when I say it's not a policy, but when you look at information security policy, so I tell you, look, in this company, we try to ensure that we want to have what's it called, information security that is that operates with best practices. Now it tells you again, what do? You know, you buy infrastructures that are up to date. You ensure that you have first-hand information about softwares and all that. So these are some of the things you get in this policy when it is written. So again, if we come to understand that we have various policies, and policies is being taken from that mindset as principles influencing action, or, you know, course of action, then you cannot apply it to foreign policy. So when the policy is said to be a foreign policy, then it should go beyond the boundaries of a given state. So if the policy is not talking about something outside the boundary of, for example, Nigeria, then it is not yet a foreign policy. So the next one is, it is also the embarked action taken by a state while interacting with other states or international system, while interacting with other states or in the international system towards achieving its set goals and objectives. So what this is trying to say is, aside the fact that, yes, we're thinking about the sovereignty, that when a policy is talking about things outside this sovereignty called Nigeria, it's called a foreign policy. Again, moving forward, so what kind of thing are you looking at that will go beyond this boundary? You're looking at how actions are taken while interacting with neighboring countries, Benin Republic, Niger, Cameroon. So when we are interacting with these people, Chad, what policy are we using? We're using foreign policy to interact with them. Then again, when we go to the international system, say we're going to UN to do things and all that, what policy do we use? We use the foreign policy. But again, we must have used that policy in order to achieve set goals and objectives. And the kind of definition I would say is more broad and more encompassing, is to say it is the set of principles that define pursued objectives of a given state while interacting with other actors in the international system in order to advance the state's national interests. So at this point now, I have come to discuss policy. I have also discussed foreign policy. Before moving to national interests, is this clear? Is there anyone or any area that I mentioned not clear that you feel we should discuss again? I'm waiting for your feedback. Oh. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, so I was just waiting for your feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we discuss national interest then?
Yes, please.
I'm not hearing from Oga Magmeda. I don't think he's getting it yet.
I did.
But you're not getting it.
Yeah, no, it's a lot clearer now.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we'll move to national interest. Let me just digress a bit and talk about personal interest. When we engage in activities, there's usually a personal interest that commits us into that activity, into that contract and all that. So that interest now is what we are now interpreting when it comes to national interest. So when you're talking about a nation having national interest, what that simply means, again, like I mentioned, is yes, you don't see a nation as a nation being personified. When they say Nigeria is playing football, it's not like they see the whole Nigeria as the map going to play that football. No, some people are representing Nigeria at that moment. And those people representing Nigeria, they must have Nigeria interest, which is termed as national interest. So when Mogatao said it is power among power, so that's what tells you that even though you see US today going to take on some, what's it called, this military, this their military attack or so, or I've forgotten the right word to use for that. When they do such thing, there is a national interest which talks about what is in it for me. So that is what powers that intention, that action, that purpose that you see. Is the interest that powers it. So when Morgan tells it is power among power, that's the idea from that angle. And again, when Kaplan makes it more, what's it called, more explanatory by saying it is the interest in which a national actor has in implementing the needs of the national system of action. Okay, there is an effort by a nation in doing something, but the actor now that takes it upon itself to say, now this is what we'll do, that interest must be there to influence that action. When you have it saying it is a concept, key concept in foreign policy. So it means, yes, when a country says, these are my policy, we want to protect our territory, we want to provide welfare for our citizens, and we want to also promote human rights. So, and US will tell you, we want to have key resources. All these are made because there is a national interest. The US is not Okay, for those who understand Yoruba, who have been listening to the old Miastro, for example, what's it called? Was this musician? Is Fuji. Trying to, I don't know why I forgot his name now. Okay, when you say the Fuji Miastro, the main Fuji Miastro, I don't know his name. Wait. Okay, so but when he said no mountain wa, that's the interest. So US today spending money.
Okay, that was still one.
I don't not one, bro. It was Baba that said this. This late Baba that said it. So
Barista now.
Barista rather. Sorry, sir. So
okay, Barista.
Yeah, when he said no, don't what? It is the interest. So US today, when US calls you and say he wants to give you grants, he wants to do some kind of support. No, there is a national interest. No way. Don't what? So they're not doing it for fun. They have sat. They have sat down to think through that. Okay, when we give this guy this money, we can say you should bring this. We can say you should close. You should not close border. We can say you should allow. What's it called? All sorts. They can influence you. That's the idea. So they want to influence you, but they can first of all say, okay, please, we are supporting you. You're doing well here. Take this money. And by the time they do that, and you collected that money, that's when they call you behind that time. Okay, I think henceforth, that thing you are doing for Russia, stop doing it. The guy has collected money, and so. But what am I saying is the interest that has been considered to come up with that policy is national interest. So that's why when the definition says it amounts to total sum or aggregate of national values, objectives, or interests of individuals or groups in the nation. So that's national interest. So I think this now explains national interest, and I've also tried to explain policy, foreign policy, national interest. So can we now proceed, or if anything is not still clear again? Hello? Hello? I'm not hearing from you.
We are here, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so let's move to determinants of foreign policy. Okay, so when you draw your policy, or when you're drawing your policy, there are some things you, as a nation, you have to consider, to show you to what extent can you achieve the foreign policy that you set to achieve. So these are the determinants. And number one here, you have quality, character, and disposition of policymakers. So this could also talk about who are your leaders.
Sorry, please, can you take that again?
I said number one, quality, character, and disposition of policymakers. Or you can say type of leadership. So we have seen countries where a particular leader will be the one that will turn things around. You have seen countries where, take for example, if you're taking Russia, for example, if you're familiar with the Russian story, at some point Russia had a leader that looks like he was weak, and at some point Russia had a leader that looks like they are very very powerful. So the quality, the character and disposition of the policymakers, without what extent your foreign policy can be achieved. Do we agree with that? I'm not getting us talking. Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, it looks like you are the only one here. So I was just trying to get that part that if we actually understand that part, there's also the political circumstance. Now, this talks about political events or political activities in the country. If you're having political instability, you can hardly achieve your foreign policy. Because yes, there will be so much attention, there will be so much resources being channeled to resolve that political instability. I hope that is also clear.
Yes, but I want to ask something. So you talked about quality, but from what you explained now, the quality is almost like the disposition of leadership.
I said so as well. I said quality, character, and disposition of policymaker, or you can say leadership. Because apparently the leaders make policy. Yeah. Same thing. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're welcome. Okay, so there's also economic circumstance. The country is struggling economic-wise. You have less time or less resources to put into your foreign policy, and that means you won't be able to achieve foreign policy as well. Resource endowment, number 4, resource endowment of the states. So yes, the amount of resources available to you will definitely come to use when you're formulating or when you're trying to achieve your foreign policy. So technically, if your country is landlocked and you can hardly get resources per se, it's difficult for you to be able to achieve your main foreign policy that you've set to achieve. What do we use? What will you use, as a basis in negotiation when it comes to mutual, when you are engaging in mutual contracts? Maybe it's bilateral or what's it called, multilateral. You don't really have a say, but when you have resources, yes, Nigeria has oil today. Like we say, it's one of the reasons why US or Britain still continue to have interest in Nigeria. So, number 5, military capability. Yes, again, how powerful are you? When you look at your military capability. US today or developed nations were able to do a lot. Even when they go to international system, going to UN and the likes, they're able to do a lot or achieve because, yes, they have military capability to pull the weights. But you can imagine when a country doesn't have that military capability, it will be very difficult to achieve their foreign policy. Take USSR, for example, when they had when they dropped, when they lost, let's say when the Cold War was over, it was as if Russia was nowhere again. Russia was dormant at that point in time when it comes to foreign policy. But At the time when they got some resources again and they were able to come back, and the military looks like they are now a bit stronger. Yes, Russia was also pulling weight at that point in time. So their military capability, also come to tell, how far they could go in the course of achieving what they are set to achieve in their foreign policy. Geographical location, this is well known to us as we've taken before. The fact that you had nations around you, quite different from a situation where on your own set out to do things like Nigeria, for example. We have our shores very close to the water, which means we can set out at any time to go and do some things that could be clandestine. But take Niger, for example. Niger won't be able to do similar things until he has the concurrence of the neighboring country. Then population and all that. So population, yes. We always say this, that the quality of your population matters, not just the quantity. This will also tell to what extent your foreign policy can change. So, I hope this is clear.
Yes, it is actually clear to me.
I'm not hearing from better again.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, sir. Okay, so let's talk about the common features of foreign policy goals. These are the common goals for most countries. When you pick up their policy, the chances that these are the common things, you have to see them. They may use their words differently, but they are the common things you should see. So if I should use the keywords, I would say welfareism, defense, reputation, peace, civilization. Like I mentioned again, these are keywords for me. Like if I pick up US policy, if I pick up China's policy, if I pick up Nigeria's policy, I should have content around these 5 things or policies being drawn around these 5 goals. Goals around welfareism goals, defense goals, reputation goals, peace goals, and civilization goals. Now let me go to explain better again. So the common features of foreign policy goals: number 1, promotion of welfare and prosperity of citizens. So just like when you go and check the US policy.
Sorry, please, I didn't get that.
I said number 1, promotion of welfare and prosperity of the citizens.
Okay, thank you.
So I think this is it is self-explanatory. Number 2, protection of sovereignty and its integrity. This is common for nations that got their independence from colonial master. The moment they are getting that independence, they are writing that foreign policy. But please, so henceforth, we are protecting our sovereignty. And again, when you're protecting this sovereignty, you want to guide, make sure that you have your integrity upheld. So number 3, projection of prestige and reputation of the nation. So we continue to brand Nigeria. Nigeria, China. So these are projections that you start giving your nation based on foreign policy. So number 4, cultivation of peace relationship and economic cooperation in relation with other nations. This is also self-explanatory. You sign treaties, you sign bilateral trade agreements, and all that. This part of the foreign policy is to ensure this goal is sustained. Cultivation of peace, relationship, and economic cooperation in relation with other nations. And number 5, encouragement of civilized standards within and with international relations. So basically, we talk around human rights. We want to ensure we protect human rights and all that. So, yes, international relations, when you engage in other country or you're going to
hello, we are here.
Okay, so that explains, most of this foreign policy also talks about protection of human rights. Trying to tell you in our nation respects, human and trying to ensure that our rights are protected.
Razak.
It's calling me.
Hello, Razak, can you hear?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, please, what's the topic of discussion?
It's common features of foreign policy goals.
Okay.
Right,
features of foreign policy. Okay, thank you.
So we're through with that. Another thing I would like to talk about is analyzing foreign policy. So basically, this is one thing that we do often and often. And all these things that we're talking about, most of them are about foreign policy. The main thing is to have comparative foreign policy. When you're comparing foreign policy, you must be able to analyze that foreign policy. So as part of the basic objective of comparative foreign policy, analysis of policy or foreign policy guides the approach to interpret the actions of the states or governments to understand the contents and actors behind given policy. So the understanding of analysis will involve correlation between resources and objectives of governments, and also the philosophical basis underlying a given policy. I repeat, understanding analysis will involve correlation between resources on one hand and objectives of the government. Then number 2, the philosophical basis underlying a given policy. So the philosophical basis, yes, is a country that promotes what's it called? Promotes capitalism, promotes liberalism, So that's where you see the philosophical basis, underlying that given policy. So when analyzing this policy as well, you should be able to talk about why, a decision was made by who, the government or state, with what forces behind the making of the decision, and or what process is involved input output stimuli of policy making and decision. It's complicated. Sorry, hold on, let me unplug my device. So I'm waiting for your comment. So I'm waiting for your comment. It's complicated or go ahead. Oh, I'm talking to myself again, no? Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Looks like I'm talking to myself. Oh.
So this one you explained seemed a bit complicated, or should I say complex?
Okay. Thanks for that. So, like I said, analyzing foreign policy, I think I've explained the essence why it's important that we'll be analyzing foreign policy, because basically that's why we are studying comparative foreign policy. So we should be able to analyze foreign policies. So this also would tell us why, even the lecturer, after telling us what policy is, he moves to foreign policy. Then the next thing was to talk about all this and, explain how we'll be comparing the foreign policies. And that was why we had that 4 developed nations and 4 developing or other developed nations. So the essence of this and having these countries cited is for us to be able to analyze while comparing their policies. So I mentioned, I said, the understanding of the analysis that we're making should also or will involve the correlation between resources and objectives of government. So for that country or for a given country, we should be able to look at, so what resources does this country has, and what are the objectives of the of the government. Now, you now need to do a correlation. So what is the relationship between these resources and the objectives of the government? So this will come into the analysis. We would have taken, what's it called? A country like, say, let me say Nigeria. Yes, we would have considered, okay, so Nigeria had crude oil. And so what are the objectives of the government, in taking some policies? Nigeria has huge markets, population. So this is also considered when the government is, sending out its foreign policy. But again, you look at the relationship between that resources and the objectives of the government in the course of analyzing the foreign policy. Again, the second thing to look at is the philosophical basis underlying a given policy. So you should be able to say, okay, from this policy now, I could see that it is tending to be, a socialist country, or a socialist policy, or a capitalist policy. Is that clear? Hello.
Yes. It is a bit.
So this and other things should be at the back of your mind when you're analyzing a foreign policy. So you should be able to bring out things under this aspect. Now, there's something we call levels of analysis. So these levels provide insight into the foreign policy action of a given state. And it also represents a case study approach to the examination of states' foreign policy action. So, level of analysis, there are basically 5 of them. And most times, when you're analyzing the foreign policy, it's interesting to have these 5 things in mind. Yes, your story could be as it is, but when you're there, maybe it should feature most of these 5. And what are the 5 levels of analysis? There is individual level, legislature, bureaucracy, national, and international. Now, once you go through these things, I want you to try to play in mind, thinking of a US policy, thinking of a Russian policy, a Nigerian policy, or South African policy, and see how you can ensure that when you're writing, you have these levels, factored into your analysis. So number 1, individual. When an individual of a given state is focused on, like the Secretary of the State or the Foreign Minister, we can conduct a study based on the individual's activity, statements, or writings to understand the foreign policy of such states. Meanwhile, this analysis has its limitation, focusing on an individual. Is that taken? Are you there?
Yes.
Okay. So, legislature. So the legislature level of analysis focuses on the debate and contributions of the legislature as regards foreign policy. This could be the examination of activities of the committee in charge of foreign policies in the legislature. This level of analysis has broader spectrum than the individual level. So is this also taken?
No.
Okay. So, the other time we talk about policymaker, and technically, the legislature would always write or will always make the law. When they make the law, yes, they will always still need the executive to ratify such by also appending the signature. On the documents to make it an act. So the legislature will always draw these bills. And the same way, they draw bills for foreign policy. So when we look at that legislative arm, their debates, their contributions, to foreign policy, then we can tell, or we can analyze foreign policy from the legislature's angle or level. So what law are they making? Are they making laws, to have, what's it called? There are times where legislators, go into foreign issues, foreign matters, and say, on this matter, I don't think Nigeria should, dabble into this, or Nigeria should respond to this accordingly. There was a time where South Africans were killing Nigerians, xenophobia. At some point, legislature, had to step up to say, look, we're going to ensure the government looks into it. And this will be our position. So when you analyze a foreign policy from the legislature level, then this is the kind of things you get. When did they make this law? And was this law made for this purpose? As it relates, to foreign institutions or foreign countries. Do we see any explanation? Hello?
Hi. Yeah.
Okay, so is that fine, or we still need more explanation? Okay, so it looks like it's not fine. Okay, so like I mentioned, when we say legislature, we all know what legislature means, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about those who make law. So when they make law, hold on, please. Okay, so when they make law, at times they respond to events, occurrence in the international system or as it affects the neighboring countries. These laws, their position, their reaction can also form bases or levels of analysis. In the sense that when you look at the legislative arm or the legislature, what law, are they making in terms of foreign policy? So let's move on to bureaucracy. For bureaucracy, it considers the activities of various branches of bureaucracy vis-a-vis foreign relations. It covers the process of bureaucrats' decision-making, reflecting shades of opinion held by them and the problems encountered in decision-making. So you can also analyze a foreign policy based on the bureaucrats' decision-making, the process of bureaucrat decision-making. So Nigeria has or operates a bicameral legislature, for example, and you can also try to see, how complicated or time, I won't say it's time wasting per se, but how long it takes for a policy, to be written and approved accordingly. So when you analyze a foreign policy based on this level, at the bureaucracy level, you talk about the process of bureaucrats' decision-making, and the problems encountered in the decision-making. So for bureaucrats, the decision-making is not usually fast. And that's because they run the control system that is, very strong. So this will move to national. So I've talked about individual, legislature, bureaucracy, now national. So this moves towards the completeness of foreign policy analysis of states. It considers the interest group view and broader picture of foreign policy. So what this means is when you're analyzing a foreign policy, you also still factor interest groups' opinions, how that has, shaped the decision of the government, plans of the government. And this would tell you more about the domestic factors, influencing a foreign policy. Okay, so international. The influence of the external environment shapes the foreign policy of the state. The level of analysis involves studying of various external stimuli in formulating foreign policy. So when you take this international level of analysis, it considers, the influence of the external environment. For example, influence of regional organization, influence of the international system, influence of neighboring countries. So with this, I think I have tried for this night too. I'd expect that we can go further. I can tell you I'm tired at the moment. Even for me, I need to sleep before I can study.
Yeah, that's fine, Azak. You've actually really explained a lot today.